You want to take us to the Raptors, our last team in the division?
Yeah, let's do it. So the Toronto Raptors, key free agents, Van Fleet and Gary Trent Jr. have player options, and then Jakob Poeltl, extension eligible candidates. Two interesting ones here to me. OG Anunoby, he's eligible for a 4-year, roughly $117 million max extension. Pascal Siakam is about 4 years and $181.1 million. Their cap situation is weird because we're factoring in all these free agents. I have them as a mini MLE team, but if you keep Poeltl, Van Vliet, and GTJ, depending on how much they get, you could run into some second apron awkwardness.
For
is
sure.
all I will say there. And then no notable trade exceptions for them. Their biggest needs, my list was actually pretty long for this team: shooting, ball handling, advantage creation, and bench depth. That's all. And a new head coach as of this recording, by the way.
Last team with that one.
So what are you thinking about with this team? I guess the place we have to start is there. Do we start with the extension eligible guys first, or no? The free agents inform more of what they're doing, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this will surprise no one who's heard me just, be incredibly conservative in my roster building kind of bent. Starting with Van Vliet and Trent Jr., I think if I'm Toronto, because the market sucks and like replacing these guys through free agency would be so difficult. I think I'd bring them both back, so long as we're not assuming there's just an absurd premium on, especially Van Vliet. You bring them back, you have your backcourt set, you can trade them later. Like, I just think preserving the asset kind of matters there, and there's just not good enough replacements. I think you're committed to bringing Poeltl back, so you're running it back. And I think the reason I'm sort of okay with that is you're going to have a new head coach, and I do think there's a distinct possibility that whether it was Nurse's fault, whether it was the roster's fault, whether it was whatever, like just a different mixture between coach and team could, whether you go positionless, whether you go conventional, I just think it's worth seeing what this personnel could do if coached by somebody different before you start like swapping out a bunch of parts and really doing things the complicated way. So I don't know what my numbers are for Van Vliet. I think anything over like 26, 27 a year feels a little iffy to me. And he's a little older too. And he's a small guard. They never age well. So if you go for like 4 years, that gets scary. Trent is kind of more fungible. Like if you let somebody walk, it would probably be him.
It feels like he's the most likely of the three to leave, right?
Yeah, I think so. And weirdly, I guess I don't know what Poeltl's market would be, but I don't think there's a super hot market for Trent just because he's really kind of a pure 2. And like, that's kind of an out of favor position anymore, unless you're Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and you're just the best at being a pure 2. Yeah, I don't know. Do you feel differently about that? Like, because the alternative is you kind of just, you sign and trade, you let these guys walk and you figure out what to do on the margins to replace them. That doesn't strike me as good an option.
No, I feel like they're more likely to do everything you said. And maybe something happens with Gary Trent Jr., sign and trade, or they let him walk. And his number is interesting. I don't know that he'll get a huge raise if he declines his player option, as we all assumed. Like, is there a team that's going to give him more than $18.8 million? Maybe it's just the same amount of money over longer years. But I think you run it back, and if you need to do something nuclear when looking at blowing it up, that's a decision you can make closer to the trade deadline, or maybe even next offseason when you're going to have another. Well, it's a natural pivot point, but it's maybe one you don't want to get to because OG Anunoby's an actual free agent. And I don't know if he signs his extension. Siakam, I think, like that's what makes, so their extensions, starting with Anunoby, 4 years and $117 million. I offer it. Do you think he would sign it?
I don't think it's enough. I think free agency is the route for him. Cause I mean, it's not way too low, but it's not.
If we're being honest, and I don't like saying this necessarily about players because it feels overly cruel, but to me, he's become one of the most overrated players in the NBA. And so that's a number I'd be comfortable paying him. I don't know how much higher I'd want to go. I just haven't seen the offensive development from him, enough of it anyway.
I think I agree with you insofar as the like offensive leap we were hoping for like 3 or 4 years running, I don't think is there. I think he's a premium role player. And as long as he thinks that, which there's some uncertainty about that. I don't know if he accepts that he's not like a guy that can and should do more offensively with the ball. If he's okay with that, I think a premium role player who can guard everywhere and can make spot up threes, like that's probably worth close to 30. like a
Yeah.
year,
And maybe if there's better spacing, he does improve offensively.
maybe.
Like they haven't necessarily surrounded him with pristine spacing.
Great point. Yeah, great point. No, so what about Siakam? I think we agree that that's not probably not quite enough for Anunoby to accept, and we'll go to free agency. Siakam is older, 181. That's a lot of money. Um, I think I think that's closer to being acceptable, but I'm curious where you're at on that.
I'd take it if I were him. If they're
You
going to
think?
give me the full year boat on it, because like you said, he is older, and I'm curious how his game ages. And so I don't know if I'm Toronto if I'm offering it. It's just because then
Hmm.
but with him going into free agency, I don't know that you want to risk it either. But you're shoehorning yourself into this very specific construct. So I think I would ultimately offer both these extensions. I
Oh,
think Siakam's more likely to accept it. I don't know if either of them accept it though.
yeah, and I think if you're talking about, you were alluding to this a little bit, looking for like routes out of this roster. If you bring back Van Fleet and Trent, and it just like it looks the same, I think even certainly at both of these extension numbers, Anunoby in particular, I think Siakam and Anunoby would be movable for like at least neutral value. Certainly Anunoby probably for positive value. Siakam, I think if you traded him early in this deal, this hypothetical 4 for 181 that we have,
Mm.
I think he's probably getting you like you're not having to attach anything to get off that. I wouldn't think. So that's your way out if this doesn't work well. And again, it's probably better to have these guys at for Siakam because we've agreed that Anunoby, if you bring him back at his extension number, you'd be totally comfortable with that. But for Siakam, like I think it's better to preserve the asset than to let him get to free agency because then that just raises a whole new suite of like not great
And there's
possibilities.
probably the argument to be made that, hey, Siakam is more valuable to you as a trade asset if he's on this longer deal than if you have to move him at
Oh
the
yeah,
deadline and he's headed
yeah.
towards free agency.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, then I don't know what you're getting for him. If you're trading him in like February of his expiring deal, that's not going to bring back nearly as much.
Any free agents, or even if you want to go trade targets, stand out to you as good fits for this team, given
I
what they
mean,
could spend?
yeah, depending on what they do, I'll jump to the trade idea. Like if Van Fleet's gone and you want to change it up, I think there's a pretty clear Anunoby as the principal for Anthony Simons and maybe a pick or Sharp or something like between Portland and Toronto. There's stuff you could get done. Um, I mean, and since we're always talking about them in conjunction with each other, like is Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga enough to get Anunoby and somebody? Do the Raptors even want to do that? This all probably presumes that Van Fleet is gone. You're not trading for
Right.
another small offense first guard if he's still there, probably. But the free agent side of things is a little murkier for me because this roster is so weird and we don't know who's going to be on it. The trade possibilities are all over the place, though, for the Raptors.
Yeah, I'd be curious, like if Malik Beasley's team option gets declined in LA. I'm wondering where that ends up. TJ Warren would be a good fit for this team. Max Strus, I don't know if they could get to the bigger MLE, so that would be tough, but he would have been would be a really good fit for them. They could be a Dario Saric team. I kind of thought
Yeah.
about. Do you like want another like kind of guy who could play the 4 or the 5 coming off the bench, and they just need bench depth in general? So those are kind of the names I have. They're just all their splashes are going to come by retaining their own. For Nas Reed would be a great fit too. They just can't afford him. I'm naming all these players they can't afford. You want to hear more Raptor free agents the Raptors can't afford, Grant? I've got a bunch of them. I think their splashes will come with retaining their own players, and if there's any real fireworks, it'll be on the trade market. They might be the most interesting team in this division though, leading into the offseason.
They certainly have like some of the most unsettled situation. Like no
That's
coach,
why it's interesting.
don't know what your backcourt's going to be. Don't know if your two best forwards are going to be traded or extended. Like it's all over the place for them.